Hello everyone and welcome to the Carnegie Mellon University Nanofabrication Facility. This presentation is one of the first steps to gaining access to the clean room that's located in Scott Hall. Throughout this presentation, we're going to cover the following topics, including how to gain access to the facility, a general overview and layout of the facility, the tools and equipment that are in the facility. We're going to cover generally what our capabilities are. We're going to talk a little bit about our lab management software, which is critical to the operation of the clean room. We'll review some lab policies that we've put in place for all users, and we'll summarize the lab entry procedures that we use to enter the lab. Finally, we'll wrap up by reviewing the necessary safety and emergency protocols that we have in place for the lab. So as far as gaining access, on this slide and the next is a short list of things that you'll need to do in order to gain access to the lab. This isn't necessarily all-inclusive. If you're looking for the complete list, you should reference the introductory email that you were sent by the staff when you first requested access. But generally, these are the steps. First, you'll want to review and understand the Nanofab guidelines document and the chemical hygiene document. These documents contain a lot of information about the lab, how we operate, and how we handle chemicals. The second thing that you can start on, if you haven't already, is completing the relevant EH&S training, which is handled through CMU's BioRaft software. So there are three main trainings that you'll need to complete. First, the lab safety and hazardous waste training. Second, the fire extinguisher training. And thirdly, the hydrofluoric acid safety training, which is required for all users regardless of whether you'll be using HF in the lab. In the introductory email, there should have been instructions about setting up an FOM user account. So you want to make sure that you have that account set up prior to entering the lab. Number 4 on the list is viewing this slide deck. Number 5 is meeting with a Nanofab staff member to review your processes, your tools, and any requirements that you have for your research. This can be done virtually or in person. Finally, one of the last things that you'll do prior to being able to enter the clean room to start your research is to take the virtual reality clean room tour and pass the embedded quiz. So this is something new that we've implemented, and you'll have to be on campus to actually take part in the virtual reality tour. But we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I'll summarize it by saying that there's an integrated quiz with the VR video, and after you've passed that quiz and completed the videos, you will then gain card access to the lab. So the lab is in normal operation hours, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. We have additional requirements that are necessary for access at night, on weekends, and holidays when the staff is not around. One more thing I want to note for any of our external users is that if you are seeking to use the lab as an external user, as someone from another university or from a company, you should contact Matt Monick to set up an external user agreement as soon as possible. So that's basically a contract that is set up between your organization and Carnegie Mellon University. That allows you to actually use the lab. So you can contact Matt Monick for that. Okay, let's jump right in and talk a little bit about the clean room facility, which was completed and handed over to us in 2017. So I want to talk a little bit about the naming of the different areas because it can get a little bit confusing. So if you hear somebody reference the Scott Hall clean room, the Bertucci Nanotechnology Lab or clean room, or the Eden Hall Foundation clean room, those are all pretty much referencing the same space. Scott Hall is the physical building that the cleanroom facility is located in. And the Claire and John Bertucci Nanotechnology Lab includes the Eden Hall Foundation cleanroom, as well as some auxiliary labs located outside the cleanroom. So just to clear that up for you, just wanted to mention that. The cleanroom itself consists of 8,500 square feet of clean space, and it's a bay and chase design that includes 3 separate e-beam rooms. As I mentioned, we have a few labs located outside of the cleanroom, including space for prototyping, post-processing, such as dicing. We have plenty of storage space for gases and chemicals, as well as spare parts. And staff offices are included in the facility as well. I want to go over a little bit about the design of the cleanroom because it really helps to inform some of the policies and protocols that are critical to our operation. So as you can see in the pictures, I'm going to bring my mouse over. This is an example of one of the processing bays in the cleanroom. Okay, the chase area that we refer to is the area in between each of the bays. And this is a photo of the chase area as well. So the way that this works is makeup air is brought into what's called the cleanroom box and picked up by these orange boxes, which are called return air handlers. So these are located in the plenum level above the cleanroom, and they are pictured in the bottom right image here. So these return air handlers basically are a series of fans that pressurize a rectangular area at the top of each of the bays. The clean conditioned air comes in, gets picked up by the return air handlers, pressurizes inside this box, and comes down with laminar flow into the bay. The air is returned into the chase area through these return air spaces here at the bottom of the bay, get returned into the chase, and some of that air is exhausted, and so there's a bit of a balancing act here between the makeup air unit and the exhaust. Now, one of the cool things about our cleanroom is that it is very energy efficient. So the energy efficiency is derived from the fans that are within the return air handlers, and they're all set up and sized to run at peak efficiency. So our cleanroom uses about 60% of the energy of an older style cleanroom from previous years. So if we were to take a bird's eye view of the Scott Hall cleanroom, the nanofabrication facility, this is what it would look like. So bringing my mouse over again, just to sort of orient yourselves a little bit, the cafeteria is located here on the left side of the facility, and the main entrance is through here. You'll notice that there's a small lounge here at the entrance to the cleanroom, and we have a series of gowning spaces here. And then once you actually enter the cleanroom, there's the main clean corridor, bays 1 through 6, the first 4 of which are class 100, the last 2 are class 10, and the 3 e-beam rooms are also class 10. The interstitial chase spaces are 1 class dirtier than the adjacent bay. So this bay is class 100, so this chase would be class 1000, and whereas this bay is class 10, this chase would be class 100. We also have a small service space that you can see here behind the e-beam rooms, as well as a staff gowning area on the south corner of the lab. If we were to pan down, you'll see some of our spaces that are outside the lab. So we have staff offices here. So Matt Monick, our executive manager, his office is here on the corner, and the rest of us share a space here directly adjacent to his office. This whole area here in teal is our spare parts storage. And then we have 2 rooms just around the corner from the offices where we have a tool prototyping room and a post-processing room. To give you some idea of where things are located, we have a couple of slides that sort of outline that. Now, during the virtual reality tour, you'll get a better idea of physically what this space looks like, but it's helpful to know generally where the different categories of tools are. So we'll start here in Bay 1. So in Bay 1, we primarily have thin film deposition tools and metrology. So we have a mix of sputtering tools, a specialty sputtering tool, a couple of legacy sputtering tools, as well as an atomic layer deposition system here in Bay 1. Because we have a lot of deposition capability, our deposition tools spill into a second bay, into Bay 2. And here we have some of our more automated deposition tools. So we have our new Lesker tools, our co-sputtering tool, and our evaporator here on the right side of the bay. We have our CVC, our production style sputtering system here in the bay. And we also have a couple of ion milling tools in this bay as well. So we start to get into a little bit of etching. Bay 3 is primarily dry etching capabilities and also a little bit of deposition. So this is where we have our parallel plate RIE tools, our ICP RIE tools, our chlorine ICP tool, our deep silicon etching tool is also in this bay. So this is mostly dry etching. Bay 4 is mostly wet chemistry, and I kind of think of this as the high hazard bay. So these 5 wet decks that are shown here in the diagram are our acid decks. So we have 20 feet of acid deck space. And we also have in this bay some annealing capabilities, a vapor HF system, and some CVD tools that utilize some chemicals that get stored in this bay. So moving on to the Class 10 area, that would be bays 5, 6, and the E-beam rooms. In Bay 5, we have more wet chemistry, but this is more geared towards solvent processing and development processes. So we have a bunch of stainless decks and associated labware and resources for using the decks. And Bay 6 is mostly lithography, so it's largely spin coating, baking, and exposure. So we have our mask aligners, our stepper in this bay as well. Jumping over to the 3 E-beam rooms, we have FEI Syrian SEM tools in room number 1 and room number 3. These two systems are very similar to each other. And in the center E-beam room, we have our Elionics 100 kV system that was installed newly with the facility. So speaking a little more on the facilities, I want to give an overview of some of the wet decks and other capabilities that are in the clean room. So our facility includes 19 wet decks, and they're broken up into different categories. So we have general solvent benches that are used for simple solvent cleans and liftoff processes primarily. We have a couple of specialty solvent benches for some heated solvents and some other applications. And as far as photo benches, we have resist spinner and developer benches located in bays 5 and 6. And we also have, as I mentioned earlier, 5 acid and base decks that are located in bay 4. Our facility also includes the E-beam rooms that we discussed that are EMI shielded. We have gas distribution and monitoring that is really state-of-the-art stuff with gas panels with dual bottles and auto crossover so that we almost never run out of gas. And that gas distribution system is located both inside the clean room and the chase areas and also on the basement level and in other areas of Scott Hall. And of course, we have all the facilities that we would need for operating a clean room of this size, including electrical panels, gas distribution, gas lines, vacuum lines and vacuum support, processed chilled water, and DI water. So our facility, as I mentioned, was completed in 2017, and it's really helped propel us forward. So a little bit more about the different wet benches. I want to make sure that I emphasize the distinction between the different categories of wet benches. So we have the general solvent benches, one of which is located in each of Bay 1, 2, and 3. And in Bay 5, the first 2 benches in the bay are identical to those located in the previous bays. And these wet benches, as I mentioned, are used for simple acetone and IPA cleans. They're plumbed with DI water and nitrogen, and they also have multisonic generators for liftoff applications. So these you'll be able to use right after the virtual reality tour, as folks have a lot of different needs for these benches. Sometimes it's just for cleaning samples, other times for liftoff processes, as I mentioned. The next category of benches include specialty solvent, resist spinners, and developer benches. So these are located in bays 5 and 6, and the operation of these benches is a little more involved, and there's a lot of bells and whistles with these benches. So for that reason, we require solvent bench training by staff members, which can be done in person or through a virtual format with a video. The acid decks are the last category, and I should say acids and bases. We have, again, the 20 feet of deck space for acids and bases in Bay 4, and we can accommodate a variety of different processes on these benches. They have hot plates, some of them. They're all plumbed with DI water and nitrogen. We have a megasonic bath, a couple of heated baths. We have a couple of benches designated for general solvent use, as well as a couple that are designated for specific processes like HF. Again, if you want to access the acid decks, those require in-person training with a staff member. So we have 3 different categories of wet benches, which require sort of 3 different types of training in order to access. I want to give you a quick overview of some of the tools in the lab. By no means is this going to be a complete, exhaustive list of the tools and capabilities that we have, but it should give you a pretty good idea. So we have more than 80 processing tools that really span the gamut of fab processing, including etching, both wet and dry etching, milling, ashing, ozone treatment, and functionalization of surfaces. We have a variety of lithography capabilities, including a number of mask aligners. We have a ASML wafer stepper, a direct write system, as well as the Elionic system for e-beam writing, which we mentioned earlier. Deposition is a real strength of the lab, so we have 15 PVD systems, including sputtering, evaporation, ALD, PECVD, CVD, parylene deposition, plating, so we can really do a lot of things with deposition. Our post-processing is mostly outside of the lab, which includes CMP and dicing. We have various inspection stations and characterization inside the lab, microscopes, SEM, probe stations. And we have a suite of metrology tools as well for characterizing films and processes, including profilometry, stress measurement, various methods of thickness measurement as well. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what we've got here. Just looking at the images, I just picked out a couple of images of some of the newer capabilities in the lab. So this is the UV ozone cleaner, this is the ASML stepper, and this is our Lesker evaporation tool. That was all of these were pretty new when we first opened the facility. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit now and talk about FOM, which stands for Facility Online Manager. In your introductory email, you should have been sent instructions for how to access FOM. So all of what I'm going to show today assumes that you've already set up your account and have access. So FOM, the software, is a package that we purchased from outside the university that is hosted on CMU's campus, and it's used to control tool access in the lab. So if you type in nanofm.ece.cmu.edu, it will take you to this landing page where it will prompt you to log in. This is only accessible if you're on campus or if you VPN into campus. So keep that in mind. So not only does FOM control tool access, but it also is a means for us to automate a lot of the billing that gets done in the lab. FOM is also a sort of one-stop shop for a lot of documentation in the lab. We also run our storeroom, our Nanofab storeroom, through FOM. And it also allows users to make their own reservations. So basically this slide says just that. So if you were to log in, what you'll see is the list of tools that you have access to, and it will tell you some information about the status of the tool. Okay. As far as tool scheduling, if you were to click on one of the calendars, one of the links in the previous screen, it will bring up the reservation calendar, which looks like this. So you can basically click on a spot here to make a reservation. And then when you go to run the tool, you'll actually log in. You'll click on your reservation, and it will prompt you to log in. So what I like to do is a quick demonstration, sort of demo here. So I'm going to pull over my browser window here. So if you type in nanofm.ec.cmu.edu, again, it lands you here. I'm going to log in with our sort of dummy Nanofab user account, but this would be your username and your password. By the way, this is not linked to the Android ID system, so this will be a unique username and password that you define for use with FOM. Okay, so once you log in, you can see any tools that you have access to. Now we have this account set up so that it can see pretty much every tool that we have in the lab. But you can see kind of what's going on here. You can see whether a tool is available, whether it's being used, whether it's down for whatever reason. And then clicking on any of these will take you to the reservation calendar. Okay, so like I mentioned, you can simply click here, enter the start time and the end time, and then reserve the tool. It will also prompt you to select an account so that your Oracle charges can be processed. So that's something that you'll input when you set up your account. But there is another functionality I want to show you, and that's the purchasing of supplies. So if you go to purchase supplies here on the left side, you'll see the list of all of the different storeroom items that we have in the lab. So storeroom items, if it's a physical item like a wafer or a pair of tweezers or a lab notebook or a sample case, droppers, all of those types of things are going to be located in the Nanofab gowning room against the back wall. Any sorts of chemicals like acids, bases, photoresists are going to be located in the areas that they're used in the lab, but all of them can be purchased through this interface. So if you needed to purchase something, for example, a lot of times people will need to purchase wafers. So a 4-inch round silicon wafer would be stock number S10. It tells you the price here, which is $20.83 per wafer. So if you needed to grab one wafer, you would simply input the quantity in the box here and then select your account. Again, because this is a dummy account, this just says Nanofab user project, but what this would typically say is your Oracle account number. Okay, so you select that and simply click submit, and it says consumables recorded, and then you can take whatever you signed out from the Nanofab storeroom. Okay, so I'm going to move this back out of the way, and we'll come back to the slide deck here. So that pretty much wraps it up for FOM. So let's talk a little bit now about some of the policies that we have in place for using the lab. Okay, so just a little bit of background. When we first certified the lab, so after the lab was built, but before we really started moving tools in, we had a test done to monitor the particles inside the clean room. So it certified at class 1 and class 10, whereas it was spec'd to be class 10 and class 100. So what that told us was that throughout the entire construction, we did a good job sort of mitigating particles, cleaning surfaces as we went, as the lab was built. So that's great, but we want to try and keep it as clean as possible for as long as possible to help us sort of cut down or reduce some of the maintenance and cleaning that we have to do periodically. So we have some rules in place to that effect. So anything that gets brought into the lab is going to need to be wiped down, including any computers, cell phones, notebooks, sample cases, things like that. Everything will need to be wiped down with a solution that we stock at the entrances to the clean room. We don't allow regular paper in the clean room because regular paper gives off a lot of particles. So we only allow clean room approved notebooks, which is kind of a special kind of paper that is woven in latex based, and it doesn't give off as many particles. So these notebooks, we stock them in the storeroom, so you're welcome to buy them from us. You're welcome to source them externally. We also have loose leaf clean room paper available for note taking. And that paper is located in the printer in the lounge area of the lab. Okay. So we have a list here of materials that are prohibited in the lab. And most of these are due to particle concerns. So this is not necessarily an exhaustive list of materials, but we'll just sort of start at the top. So you never want to bring in any type of paper product into the clean room, anything like cardboard or newspaper or books or wood or like anything like that. Wood and paper products shed a lot of particles, so we want to avoid bringing them in. Any type of cloth material that might be on a computer sleeve or backpack or a bag or something we would want to avoid. While we mentioned that you can bring in your laptop and chargers and cell phones and things like that, carrying cases we want to avoid because they're difficult to wipe down. Any type of fabric-y material is going to trap particles and potentially be a contamination risk. In the same sort of vein, jackets or hats or any type of outerwear should be left outside the clean room. No food and drink should be brought into the lab. There is a water fountain in the gowning area for users to use to stay hydrated, but in general, any food or drink should be left outside the lab. We have to be careful about our choice of writing utensils, so we don't want to bring in pencils because graphite and erasers and things like that are going to shed a lot of particles, as well as dry erase markers. We do have writing utensils throughout the lab, so regular Bic pens are fine. We don't really regulate anything outside of what's listed in that bullet point, we have Sharpies and things like that in the lab as well. Any type of powder should not be brought into the clean room. Anything like nanoparticle solutions kind of fall into this category as well, because if they are dehydrated, they can turn into powders and thus be a particle risk. You also want to avoid the use of any adhesives like tape, tack, or glue, because these types of materials tend to leave a sticky residue behind. And anytime that we have a need for adhesives in the lab, we have a clean room compatible version that we either stock in the storeroom for sale or just make available to users. So we have things like capped on tape, which can be used in certain vacuum systems. We have just kind of like standard tape to use outside of vacuum systems that doesn't leave like a sticky residue. We have certain vacuum compatible greases and double-sided tapes that we use for mounting samples. So anything like that we're going to have inside the clean room. So then also we ask that users go easy on any type of cosmetics, makeup, hairspray, gel, cologne, perfume, anything that has a fragrance to it is going to be releasing particulate. So avoid the use of those where you can, for sure, when you know you're coming into the lab. So, and then finally, any other material that would either shed particles or leave residue on surfaces. Those are the things that we're trying to avoid. And if you have a question about a new material or something that's not listed here, please reach out to the Nanofab staff, and we'll be happy to advise you. We also ask that any smokers wait 45 minutes before entering the lab after using tobacco products. And the last bullet point here is really important. No outside chemicals are allowed to be brought into the lab without approval from Nanofab staff. So if you do have a need for a chemical that's not stocked in the lab, that's not available in the lab, please contact us, because we want to know about that before you bring it in. And if it's a new material, we want to know and have that discussion prior to you even ordering it. Okay, so this is something that we need to abide by in terms of being in compliance with EH&S. I also want to make a note that no chemicals can be removed from the lab either, even though we allow folks to purchase things like resists, and we have solvents available and other chemicals in the lab, acids and bases. Nothing should be brought out of the lab and like taken back to your lab. Again, that would put us in violation of EH&S protocols. So if you have any questions about our chemical policy, please feel free to reach out to the staff. Okay, so we're going to run through the general procedure for entry. As I am making this recording, it's June 2021, so we are sort of starting to turn the corner on the coronavirus and all the implications that had on our lab's operation. So I'm going to cover sort of like the standard entry procedure, but just realize that as we, as coronavirus sort of took hold, we modified a lot of these procedures, and then there's going to be some modification going forward as well. Okay, so if you're standing, our virtual tour here sort of starts out in the cafe area. Once you enter the reception area, you'll see a reception desk, a conference table in that area, some storage in that area. So the first thing that you'll do once you arrive would be to use the shoe cleaner here. And basically to use it, you simply push on the silver bar, which starts the bristles in the vacuum, and you stick each foot one at a time in this space, which will remove like bulk particulates and debris from your footwear. I should mention that the expectation when you're coming to the lab is that you have lab appropriate clothes and shoes on in terms of cleanliness. So, particularly as we get into like rainy seasons in Pittsburgh and the winter season where you may have, dirtier footwear, we ask that you, really be diligent about wiping your feet, outside in the cafe area where we also have a little brush that you can push your foot up against in order to remove bulk particulates before you come in here to use the automatic shoe cleaner. Okay. In the pre-gown space, we also put on bouffant caps and beard covers if they're needed. So if users have more than a couple days of facial hair growth, we would ask that they wear the beard cover in addition to the bouffant cap. And these are going to be they're located in dispensers. In dispensers on this wall right here. All of the sliding doors to enter the clean room are activated with a push button on the wall. So in this case, when you're standing here in the lounge, directly on the right there is a button here that you can push that will cause these doors to open. Now is probably a good time to explain kind of how those doors work. So basically, the system is perfectly happy to allow you to have this set of doors open into the pre-gown space, which is really just a space that we keep clean. The door into the gowning space, which is actually part of the clean envelope, can be open at the same time as this door. However, the sliding door that goes from the gowning space into the actual clean room, which is in kind of like the back part of this photo, that door cannot be opened at the same time as the door into the gowning room because we're trying to maintain the positive pressure inside the clean room. Okay, so if at any point you're passing through here and you hit the button and the door doesn't open, likely that means the door to the lab is currently being used and is open. So all you have to do at that point is simply wait. You don't have to continue mashing the button here. If you simply wait until the other door closes, then this door will open up. So as we progress into the pre-gown space, this is also our wipe down area. You want to make sure that you fill out the entry log form. That's a link to which is posted on the door, the sliding doors that lead you into this area. So you want to make sure that you're logging in and out of the clean room each time that you enter or exit. Anything that we're bringing into the clean room is going to need to be wiped down with an IPA DI water mix in this space. So we have a spray bottle and some wipes in this area for that purpose. We also use the pre-gown space for putting on shoe covers and as well as pre-gown gloves. And so there will be dispensers for those in this area as well. So when you're ready to enter the gowning room, this is what it will look like. So these top two images here are as you are looking from the gowning room towards the clean room. This is kind of one side of the garment rack. And this is kind of if you were to step a little bit to the left and look at the garment rack. This view here is from the clean room entrance towards the pre-gown space in the lounge. So again, just to orient yourselves, the pre-gown space is shown here. The lounge and everything would be over here in this diagram. So we have benches that you can use to help yourself gown up. In the center here, you will see either racks for hanging up the garments, or you will see bins for garment storage. New garments can be pulled from the gown storage area here, which is basically just a series of racks. We also have special racks for the booties that go on over top of the shoe covers. Those get stored here in little cubby areas. The water fountain is here. shown here right next to the boot rack. And then the storeroom area is here against the back wall. So it's not shown in this image, but the racks for that would be like right here, okay? So we have space for plenty of users. Every user will have an assigned space in this area to store their garments. So once you're in the, once you enter the gowning space, again, you're actually inside the clean room at that point. So at that point, you will have on your bouffant cap, your pre-gowning gloves, as well as the shoe covers. So a quick note about the clean room gowns. The hood has an integrated face veil. The coverall is zippered in the front. It has knit elastic cuffs to provide better fit. And there's a variety of snaps on both of these items, as well as the clean room boots, to allow for a better, more comfortable fit. Okay, so we talked about using the shoe cleaner. We talked about the pre-gowning. We talked about the pre-gowning components. So when you're ready to actually gown, you're going to gown up from head to toe. So you'll start by putting on your hood, and then the coverall, and then the boots. So the hood will tuck inside the coverall, as you can see in the image here. The coverall pant legs will tuck into the boots here. And then finally, before you enter the lab, you will always be wearing a pair of safety glasses, regardless of if you have corrective lenses. And then we will put on a pair of nitrile gloves, typically over top of the pre-gown gloves. Nitrile gloves are they're very clean and offer a little bit of chemical resistance as well. When we're degowning, it will essentially be done in the reverse order as gowning. So you will degown from toe to head, and store all of your garments in the applicable areas. And then when you're back down to the disposable pre-gowning garments, you'll walk straight out of the gowning room into the pre-gowning area, into the lounge, and into the cafe, where you will discard the disposable parts. Okay. So we'll spend the last quarter of this presentation really digging into safety items and a review of some of the alarms in the clean room, as well as emergency procedures. So I should mention that a lot of the things that we're covering today are going to be presented in greater detail and sort of more visual detail during the VR video that you'll watch. But we'll cover them here, and it's going to be helpful for you to see these things multiple times. So if there is an emergency in the lab, anything that would pose a threat to your safety, the only thing you really need to worry about is getting out of the lab. So you don't need to worry about ungowning. You simply walk out of the lab through the exits in your full garment. We're not going to waste time degowning in this type of situation. You also don't need to worry about the status of your sample or any processes that you're running. So you'll simply leave the tool as it is if you're running a tool, and exit the clean room. And so we're going to review some of the exit routes, some of the ways to get out of the clean room and out of Scott Hall on one of the last slides of the deck. So typically, if an emergency situation does present itself, the staff will be around in order to direct folks to the right area. But in the unlikely event that you were in the lab without the staff around, or if you eventually acquire non-staffed hours access, you'll want to know kind of what the protocol is. So basically, you would exit the lab, get yourself to a safe location, assist any others who are in need of help, and then contact campus police at 82323 from any campus phone. Or if you want to put into your cell phone, 412-268-2323, that's the full 10-digit number. It's important that, if there is an emergency, that you do not call 911, which seems a little bit counterintuitive. But the upshot is that campus police are trained to respond to a variety of different emergencies, and they have direct lines to emergency responders and can get emergency responders to campus where we need them most efficiently. So just remember that 82323 number if anything should happen that would cause or present an emergency situation. So we're going to review different types of emergencies, which are listed here. These are not necessarily all of the emergencies that could present, but it's a pretty good list. So the first three emergencies are actually accompanied by an alarm, and we're going to talk about those in detail in the coming slides. So any of these situations would warrant an immediate evacuation because they are a threat to personal safety. So a fire or a fire alarm, regardless of whether it is occurring actively in the lab, is a reason to evacuate. We have a hazardous gas detection system because we have gases in the lab that are particularly hazardous, things that we use in different processes such as chlorine gas, BCl3, HF gas, silane, ammonia. So it's things that you wouldn't want to be around even at the parts per million level. So we have detectors staged throughout the lab, and we'll talk a little bit about them as well as the alarm towers here on the next slide or perhaps the one after. We have an exhaust alarm system set up as well that's integrated into the gas detection alarms. The final three here in this list are sort of, well, they aren't accompanied by an alarm, so you just kind of have to know that these are an emergency situation. So a power outage, if power goes out in the lab, typically that's going to sort of end your day anyway because pretty much every tool in the lab has electricity running to it. And it could, a power outage situation could present other hazards as well in terms of, safety systems being compromised, things like that. So any type of power outage in the lab would be a reason to evacuate. A major flood, so we're talking here about like a large quantity of water coming into the lab. We're not talking about like, a puddle or a drip from a water line or something. In that type of situation, you would let the staff know, but we're talking about like huge amounts of water in the lab, like sprinkler system fail or like a massive failure somewhere that's causing a lot of water to come into the lab. So that would be a reason to evacuate. Strong chemical odors. Typically, they're really, if you're working with chemicals properly and those around you are doing so as well, typically you can't really detect any of the chemicals that we use in the lab, even those that are highly volatile. So, if you ever do smell something, particularly something that is solventy smelling or sweet smelling, something that burns your nose and throat, or something that makes you feel ill in any way, something that might give you a headache or make you cough or gag or whatever, that would be a reason to evacuate the lab. So there's a little bit of judgment involved on this, and I realize that. But if you're ever in doubt about whether an odor is normal or would be a reason to evacuate the lab, you're always it's always okay to err on the side of caution in that situation and simply remove yourself from the area until we can figure out what the smell might be. So if someone were to be critically injured or impaired, we would, again, the staff should be present, but you would assist them as needed if you were nearby, which would mean potentially helping someone to an eye wash station or a safety shower if they spill chemical on them. Call campus police if the Nanofab staff aren't present, or if if somebody were injured and you needed an ambulance, you could call campus police straight away, and then wait with them until help arrives. So again, the last bullet point is just reinforcing what I already said. If you're not sure if something's an emergency or if it's normal, or if you're hearing an alarm and you're not sure if it's an emergency alarm or just like a tool finishing a run, always feel free to contact the staff. Exit the lab if it's a potentially dangerous situation, and then contact the staff, because we're in there almost every day. We know what's being worked on. We know what the different safety systems are and what might be a component of a tool or something else. So, don't be afraid to contact us, whether it's an emergency situation or if you just see something out of the ordinary and you're not sure if all is as it should be. So yeah, always feel free to email us, give us a call. So to that end, clean room phones there are phones located in the clean room. So we do have minimal cell phone reception in the lab. We do have routers inside the lab, so if you're going to do any Wi-Fi calling or any sort of work on the internet is fine. But for actually placing phone calls, we have corded phones inside the lab in front of chase 3, which is shown here, and then chase 6 over by the acid benches, and then inside the chases as well. So the general lab number, if you wanted to call into this phone, is 412-268-3388, or simply you can dial 83388. Right next to each one of these phones is a little placard that has contact information for EH&S and for campus police, the 82323 number. There are also contact numbers there for reaching the staff, so our personal cell phones are on there as well. So safety showers and eye wash stations are going to be located in the main clean corridor at the end of each bay. So you'll see them sort of as you look down the clean room corridor, hanging from the ceiling. So this is the shower head, and the shower is activated by simply pulling down this lever, which starts the flow of water. To start the eye wash station, you pull this drawer out, and then it will look like this. There are a couple of eyepieces in there, and then you would rinse your eyes for at least 15 minutes if it's a standard chemical. If those are activated, there will be an alarm here that goes off to just sort of notify other users in the area that someone's having a problem here, and then there are instructions here as well. But it's pretty straightforward. So we're going to review a couple of the emergency off buttons. So we have emergency power off buttons that are located all around the fab, and those are shown. An example of that is shown on the left-hand image here. So it actually says the word emergency power off, so you know that this is the power off button. Unfortunately, the gas shut off buttons look very similar, but you can see they do look a little bit different. It's a little bit bigger, a little bit different in terms of text. So this, the emergency gas off button shown here will stop the flow of all gases in the lab at the gas cabinets, and the emergency power off will cut off power to the entire lab. So This you would only, the emergency power off, you would really only activate if it was truly an emergency situation. So an example would be like if a tool is injuring someone, and even then, like your first action probably is going to be to try and emo the tool itself. But if for some reason, that's either not working or you're a distance away, you could hit the emergency power off button. The emergency gas off button would typically be activated if there was a gas leak that wasn't being detected, if there was a flood or a fire or some sort of destructive building event, where we would want to make sure that the gas isn't just running if the gas lines get compromised. So as far as location, where these are located, you'll be shown kind of explicitly in the VR video, but the emergency power off buttons are sort of sprinkled throughout the lab. The idea here is that they would be located in places where you might be able to get to them quickly. The emergency gas off disconnects are going to be located at all clean room exits. The idea being if there was a gas leak, you could hit this on the way out, or if there is, like, again, one of these situations that would warrant pressing the button, a leak, a fire, a flood. The idea is you could press that on your way out of the lab. So talking a little bit more about the hazardous gas detection system. So we talked about the detectors that we have in the lab for the hazardous chemicals. And then we have the detectors located kind of in one area, and then throughout the lab we'll have these alarm towers. Okay, these are located actually inside the lab, outside the lab, in the chases and different parts of Scott Hall where we have gas lines running and things like that. So basically there's just three colors. The green light, which is kind of the everything is okay status indicator, will be on most of the time. So that's the normal state. A blue light would indicate a system fault. If that will happen very rarely, but typically a blue light would be indicative of a problem with the system, whether that's a wire is unplugged somewhere, something's not getting power, a problem with the electronics or whatever. In that situation, you should let the staff know, if we're not already aware, and but you don't need to evacuate in that scenario. The blinking red light would be the one where you would need to evacuate immediately. So it will actually start flashing the red light, and then there is an audible sort of chirping sound that goes along with this. So that would be an automatic evacuation. And then from that point, you'll listen to the building fire alarm system in order to know what to do next. For example, if it is a fire alarm, whether it's a drill or an actual fire or somebody pulled the fire alarm, whatever, it's going to come on with a recording that says a fire emergency has been reported in the building. Please leave the area by the nearest exit and get to a safe area. So we'll just say that on repeat. These hazardous gas alarm towers also double as our exhaust failure indicator. So if this alarm is blinking red, it can actually mean either a gas leak or it could potentially mean an exhaust failure. Either way, there's the potential for exposure to noxious gases. So in any case, you don't need to figure out which one it is. You can simply evacuate via the nearest exit. So we talked a little bit about that event here. They'll blink red in alarm, evacuate immediately, and assemble in the cafe. If the way that you can kind of tell the difference between an exhaust event or a loss of exhaust and a gas alarm is that if it is an exhaust event, all of the wet decks in the lab will simultaneously go into a fault state and turn off because they have interlocks built into them to shut down if there is no exhaust, if we lose exhaust. So that would happen, and then you would see like one of these alarm lights here in this bank of 4 will light up as well. So that might tell you that it is an exhaust failure rather than a hazardous gas actual detection. I mean, in any case, you don't really need to be trying to figure this out while you're there, but I just thought it might be good information to have. There are also situations where we might have like a local exhaust failure. So if a deck is in an alarm state, again, this will cause it to shut down. But if there's no gas alarm currently going off, that might mean that there's a problem with the deck. So in that case, you want to just stop using the wet deck and then notify the Nanofab staff that something weird's going on, and that and then we'll go and take a look at it. A little more on the fire safety systems. You're probably familiar with what the annunciator panels look like with the strobe light. We have these fire pull stations also located at every exit in the clean room. So at every exit you'll have a gas off button, which is also labeled with to distinguish it from the power off buttons, which remember look similar. But you'll also find a emergency fire pull station at every exit as well. Parts of the clean room have automated systems that will detect flames and try to extinguish it with by dumping CO2, for example, into the wet decks. So that might be, something you see if there was like a fire or a heat event inside the clean room. We also have a sprinkler system in the lab, and that will activate if there's enough heat to actually trigger the sprinkler heads to pop. So we require all users to complete fire extinguisher training, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So fire extinguishers are always located just inside the clean room chases, which are accessible from either end of the bay. So typically they'll be mounted directly on the wall, or they might be located inside a box, mounted on the wall. So, you're never going to be more than about 20 feet from a fire extinguisher, no matter where you are in the clean room. So, the rule from EH&S is if a fire is smaller than an office waste container, so maybe smaller than like a 1 to 2 foot diameter, you could attempt to put it out using one of the clean room fire extinguishers that we have in the lab, because that could potentially prevent loss of life and loss of property. But you would only do so if you could do so safely. So that would mean that you had left yourself an egress path so that you're not completely surrounded by flames. So that's something you would want to be thinking about if you were making this decision. We talked a little bit about the fire suppression system already, but just to review, these big red bottles in the chase are CO2. We have nozzles inside the bench for CO2. The UVIR sensor, which is looking for a spark or a flame in order to trigger the fire suppression system. And just realize that the manual fire pull station on the bench here will also activate the fire alarm. So it's tied into the building fire alarm system. So we'll review where all the exits are, but we talked about the interlocks with the galley room doors. If there was an emergency, obviously you don't want to wait for the doors to open and close. So what you would do is simply push on the doors. So from the inside, this is a photo taken from the gowning area. If you're in the gowning area and these doors are closed and you couldn't get through, all you simply have to do is push on the doors and they will break away off the hinges. And then you'll be able to exit and the doors can be reset at a later date and time. Other than the main entrance, all of the other doors out of the lab are going to have a standard push bar on them. So pretty straightforward. So lastly, I want to wrap up by reviewing evacuation protocols. Okay, so we have a diagram here of the facility, and there's two kind of levels of evacuation. So scenario one would be if there's no announcement from the fire alarm system. Maybe there's a local alarm, maybe not. You would evacuate into the cafe area and just kind of hang out there until either Nanofab staff comes by or EH&S or campus police or whoever. And you should never re-enter after an emergency unless you've gotten the clearance from EH&S or the Nanofab. So Nanofab staff. So this first evacuation scenario is really like if there is an exhaust alarm, which is just kind of like a local alarm. If there is a gas detection, depending on where the gas detection is, it may trigger just an evacuation of the clean room, or it may trigger a building level evacuation. So that's what we're talking about with evacuation scenario 2, is a clear announcement from the fire alarm system, that would tell you to exit the clean room. Your primary evacuation point for a building evacuation is going to be over here in Hammerschlag sea level, kind of near where the makerspace is, the tech spark space. So you would simply walk out, these double doors would probably be quickest, go here to the ramp, and then exit here. Once you pass through the threshold, you're actually standing in Hammerschlag Hall, which is a different building. So if there was no alarms there, then you would be safe there. So the backup rally point is going to be the 5th floor of Wien Hall. So you'll simply go up the steps on this side of the lab, and sort of as soon as you walk over to here, you're going to be inside the 5th floor of Wien Hall. So if the path to Hammerschlag was either blocked or not safe to pass, you would go up to Wien Hall. So that would typically be like any fire alarm is an automatic building evacuation. And then certain gas detections could also represent a building evacuation. Okay. Couple more things I want to note about this diagram and this layout. So first, you'll notice all the red arrows. Those are all exits from the lab. So at each corner of the lab, there's going to be an exit. You could even exit through the e-beam chase here if you wanted. The key is if there is a hazardous gas alarm, or even if you suspect a hazardous gas detection, you want to avoid this area here, because in the chase, this is where we have a lot of those nasty chemicals that we are monitoring the air for. So they might have a gas bottle there or plumbing that runs through that area. So that would be a good area to avoid. So the rule of thumb here is if you are located in bays 1, 2, or 3 and the fire alarm goes off, you'll exit on the left side of the lab here. And if you're in bays 4, 5, or 6, you're going to be on this side of the lab. You can exit out one of the alternate egress paths here. So I also like to review with people at this point where the entrances and exits to Scott Hall are actually located, because um, Scott Hall was kind of built in between a couple of other buildings on campus, so there's kind of a lot of different ways to get in and out of Scott Hall, but by staying inside. So, and in general, there's just like a lot of exits from Scott Hall. So, obviously, you can come here to the makerspace. If you proceed out down this hallway, you'll end up in looking right at like Scaife Hall. There's a footbridge over here, a pedestrian bridge for connecting to Roberts Hall. So across the footbridge is Robert, so you could go out that way. There is an elevator located here in the cafe seating area. So that's an option unless there's like a fire alarm. So if there's a fire, you never want to jump into an elevator. You want to take the stairs. Further down this hallway, if you get to the end of the hallway, you just walk straight through here. As you make a left, there will be a men's room, and across from that men's room, there is a stairwell that will drop you off on the other side of Hammerschlag Drive once you get to the bottom of it. There's Wien Hall, of course. There's the ANSYS building exit, which is kind of where you'll end up if you take this exit. And then it's not shown here in the diagram, but there is another exit into Hammerschlag, like right here on this wall. So it's good to know where all these areas are, just to help you navigate campus, but also for your own safety. So if you're new to CMU's campus, it would be great to take some time to just sort of walk around and kind of get a feel for the campus and where things are located and where things connect. It'll help you out in the long run. So we talked about the evacuation scenarios, and that concludes the presentation. So I will send you a copy of this presentation if I have not already, or you will receive one. And the next step after attending this orientation, if you're a standard CMU user, would be to attend a virtual reality tour with the Oculus headsets that we have. And to do that, just schedule it with a Nanofab staff member. So if you have any questions at all about anything that was covered in this presentation, about any of the topics, please feel free to email the staff distribution list, and we will answer any questions that you may have, and we'll do so in a timely manner. So thank you for your attention, and we look forward to seeing you in the lab.